Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. So today we're tackling something that I know almost all of us do, and honestly, half the time we don't even realize we're doing it. We're going to dive right into how simple, everyday pondering can completely spiral out of control and, morph into clinical anxiety. If you've ever felt like your own brain is literally working against you, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to break down the actual science behind the anxiety spiral and show you exactly how this mental trap works.
Let me ask you this. Have your own thoughts ever actually felt dangerous? You know that panicked, sweaty feeling when it suddenly hits you that you've completely lost control of your own internal monologue? Well, psychologists call this meta-worry, which literally means worrying about the fact that you're worrying. And man, it is an incredibly stressful state to be in. But to figure out how we get to this point of sheer panic, we really need to back up and look at how this whole cycle actually kicks off in the first place.
All right, part one, the overthinking trap. Let's look at why our brains actually choose to worry.
So the most crucial thing to understand right out of the gate is that overthinking doesn't just happen by accident. Believe it or not, your brain is actually trying to protect you. It's using a concept called contrast avoidance. Think of it like metaphorically strapping on heavy armor. We intentionally maintain a baseline of negative emotion so we aren't totally shocked if sudden bad news hits, right? By constantly preparing for the absolute worst-case scenario, you avoid that awful sudden drop from feeling happy to feeling devastated. But paradoxically, keeping that heavy armor on all the time just traps you in a chronic state of distress simply to avoid being surprised by it.
And here's the tricky part. We actually convince ourselves it's a good thing. We trick ourselves with something called positive metacognitive beliefs. Basically, we confidently believe that all this worrying is highly productive. We mistakenly assume that churning these thoughts over and over is helping us. Solve problems, or understand our deep feelings, or prepare for threats. We literally validate our own repetitive anxiety. We tell ourselves, hey, I need to overthink this. It's how I stay prepared. But that belief just acts as a trigger, constantly kicking off more negative thinking because we mistakenly think the trap is actually a helpful tool.
Moving on to part two, your brain's false alarms. Seeing threats everywhere.
Okay, so once we fall into the trap of believing our worry is actually helping us, our brain starts to rewire how we interact with the world around us. It relies on what's called attentional bias. Your brain essentially slaps on a pair of threat-seeking binoculars. You end up hyper-focusing on danger while completely tuning out all the good or even just neutral things around you. And this creates a really vicious self-maintaining cycle. Your worry forces you to pay more attention to threats, and then, of course, finding those threats just fuels even more anxiety.
And this hyperfocus works hand in hand with interpretation bias. This is when your brain looks at, say, a completely harmless shadow on the wall, but automatically assumes it's a terrifying monster. Interpretation bias means you just automatically assume the worst or the most threatening outcome in situations that are completely ambiguous or neutral. Because you're constantly presuming danger is out there, the perceived threat in your environment skyrockets. It's basically continuously throwing fuel onto your ongoing anxiety fire.
Which brings us to part three. Running on mental empty, the hidden cognitive drain.
Keeping those false alarms ringing all day long, it takes a massive hidden toll on your mind. It causes a severe depletion of attentional control. When you're stuck in an anxiety spiral, up to 90% of your mental battery is just eaten up by overthinking and distracting worries. That leaves a measly 10% for intentional problem solving, or, just enjoying your day. Because this cognitive drain is so incredibly intense, it deeply impairs your ability to intentionally shift your focus. You simply do not have the mental energy left over to hit pause on the anxiety spiral once it gets going.
Furthermore, pathological overthinking relies on a really exhausting abstract analytic processing style. This means you're endlessly asking vague, unanswerable questions. Things like, why did this happen to me? Or what does this mean for my entire future? Now compare that massive energy drain to concrete present focus, which is asking, how do I fix this specific issue right now? Relying on that abstract, vague style completely blocks the positive resolution of actual problems. It impairs your emotional regulation and just drives maladaptive anxiety, all because you're stuck in an inflexible loop of analyzing instead of concrete doing.
All right, part four, sleepless nights, echo chambers. Let's look at when anxiety bleeds into the outside world. So eventually, this massive internal cognitive drain starts spilling out into your physical health. I think we can all relate to lying wide awake, totally exhausted, just staring blankly at the ceiling. Engaging in repetitive negative thinking, especially right at bedtime, directly ruins your subjective sleep quality and gives you far shorter rest. And here is the real kicker.
When your sleep is compromised, it completely undermines your ability to adaptively cope with the daily stressors you're going to face the next morning. It's a brutal cycle. A lack of sleep makes you more anxious, which makes you overthink more at night, which then just ruins your sleep all over again.
And this exhaustion, it also bleeds right into our relationships through what researchers call co-rumination. This is when you excessively rehash your problems with a friend, they validate how terrible everything is, and then you both leave feeling worse. Now, while venting like this can temporarily build a feeling of social closeness, it actually acts as a literal contagion for anxiety. It reinforces the perceived severity of the stressors and completely prevents active, problem-focused coping. You aren't finding solutions, you're just amplifying each other's anxiety in a giant echo chamber.
Finally, part 5, breaking the anxiety cycle, confronting the fear of your own thoughts.
And this brings us right back to that terrifying peak of the spiral we talked about at the beginning, meta-worry. When you feel trapped inside that dizzying, spinning wheel of thoughts, you develop negative beliefs about the thinking process itself. You begin to feel like your thoughts are truly uncontrollable, dangerous, or that you might literally go crazy. Your brain is quite literally terrifying itself. And the data shows that this specific meta-worry, fearing the act of worrying, is actually a key predictor of severe clinical anxiety disorders.
But here's the good news. Knowing all of your brain's traps, from intentionally putting on that heavy armor through contrast avoidance to spreading the panic through co-rumination, well, the first step to breaking out of the spiral is simply recognizing that you're in it. So I'll leave you with this. The next time your brain rings a false alarm, what are you going to do? Will you blindly put your armor back on, or will you choose to step out of the loop? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.